Hello and welcome to the IslesNation podcast. I'm Pete Truskowski, also known as at NY IslesNation, and I'm joined today by Mike Rankuski and Carey Haber. How are you guys doing today?
Doing
Take it
good.
away, man. This is all you. I know you got something on your mind, and I think everyone wants to hear it.
Oh, I've got something on my mind, that's for sure. Well, as we all know, it was the NHL trade deadline day today, and the Islanders made one move. They traded their third round pick this year to the Ottawa Senators for forward Shane Prince and a seventh round pick. I know probably a bunch of us, when we saw the news, reacted with, "Who the fuck is Shane Prince?" And you weren't alone. I mean, I heard of Shane Prince, but I can't say I was familiar with his game. But looking at Shane Prince, the player, is a micro picture of what I felt after today. And let's start off by saying over the past few years, ever since I protested the team in 2014, I feel like I've mellowed out as a fan. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's me getting older and seeing there's bigger things in life and it's not worth getting worked up over stuff like this. Maybe it's the fact that this team's finally good and I have expectations that this hockey team's going to compete every night. And I let the little things slide. Maybe it's a bit of a loss of passion with the whole Brooklyn thing. I don't feel like my emotions go high as low as they did just a few years ago. Is that a good or a bad thing? I don't know. But today rubbed me completely the wrong way and brought out the emotion that I haven't felt since Game 7 of last year's playoffs. Now let's get it started by saying that Shane Prince might be a good player one day, but he is the furthest thing from what this team needed today. In fact, there's nothing to prove that Prince will ever be anything. He could turn out to be a productive player, sure. He could turn out to be the next Justin Papineau or Jeff Tambellini or Conacher. From everything I've read, he seems like the typical quadruple A player. Too good for the minors, not good enough for the NHL. And trust me, the Islanders could use a quadruple A player because they have NHL players, they have top-level prospects, and they have absolute dreck in the minors. Nothing in between. But is that really the only move you're going to make on your biggest trade deadline as a GM, Garth? According to Senator fans, they had to move him out because he was competing with a list of players like Curtis Lazar, Pumple, Paul, Zingle, and White for his spot. What a list to be a part of. Why use arguably our most attractive asset that we'd actually consider moving on a project while we're still in a playoff stretch run? But notwithstanding, Prince has potential, so this isn't about him as much as it is the macro picture. What does adding a forward that can't crack the everyday lineup of a non-playoff team do for us? At best, at absolute best, this guy is in the conversation of the 10 or so Jekyll and Hyde forwards we already have, with Josh Bailey, Brock Nelson, Anders Lee, Kuhlman, Grabowski, Strome, Bernier. He might have potentially be better one day, but as of now, he's Tyler Kennedy. Let's go over some of the names that were traded today that I think that Garth should have pursued that he didn't. Not only today, but in the past few days as well. Let's start with Brandon Peary from Florida. 24 years old, half a point a game this year, 22 goals in 49 games last year. Was traded for a sixth-rounder. Chris Versteeg was traded for a nothing prospect and a conditional fifth. 33 points on the year, 420-goal seasons in the NHL, positive possession player, over 80 playoff games, over 40 playoff points, 2 cups. Teddy Purcell, traded for a conditional third-rounder. 32 points, 6 straight seasons over 30 points. Positive possession player, 18 playoff points in 22 games. Yuri Hoodler, second and a fourth-rounder. 192 points in his last 248 games. 31 goals and 76 points last season. 77 career playoff games, over 40 playoff points. Won a cup, 8 points in 11 playoff games last year. P.A. Parenteau didn't even get traded. 32 points in the year. Experience with John Tavares and this team's core. Surely the Leafs would have taken third or a fourth rounder. They had no reason to keep him around, and I'm sure the Islanders just needed to offer something. But that brings me to my point that Garth Snow is not acting like a GM that has any questions about his job security. If the Islanders go out in the first round again this year and new ownership takes over, how's Garth going to answer that? Well, I tried. I brought in Shane Prince this trade deadline to bolster my team. I don't think that's a good answer there, Garth. I mean, since the Islanders' hot start of last season, We've now passed 2 trade deadlines in one whole summer where they did absolutely nothing to improve this team. What exactly is the goal here? Are these results good enough? Just making the playoffs, going out in the first round? And if it's not, what gives Garth the idea that this team can just magically get better without outside help? If the strategy is to sustain winning, what exactly is the definition of winning? Because if this is winning, then me and Garth have completely different ideas of what winning is. Since the loss to the Penguins in 2013, the goal should be to make noise in the playoffs, win around. Instead, we missed the playoffs right after, lost in the first round after that, and now it looks like we're perfectly fine with repeating that course. Trust me, I appreciate the fact this team actually wins some hockey games this year and in the past few years. I appreciate the fact that I don't want to cry every time I watch an Islander game, but now it's a different type of disappointment. How do you think JT feels? The team he suffered through long, cold years with. The core he grew up with is likely in their final hurrah. Travis Hamonick's gone after this year. Likely so is Kyle Oposo. Maybe even Franz Nielsen. The rebuild that he and we suffered through is already losing some of its key parts. You did nothing to give this core one last fighting chance this spring. Why should we, and JT, and the rest of the team believe that things will be different when we replace Hamonic, Oposo, and Nielsen with Pulak, Dalcol, and Barzal? How can you look your fan base and your team in the eyes when you're destined for a first-round playoff matchup with the Rangers, who just acquired a player that was considered a superstar a few seasons ago, and you bring in the forward version of Matt Donovan? The Rangers swept us in 1994. We haven't won a playoff series since '93. We've watched them make deep playoff runs as we sucked, and you can't gear up for an inevitable series with our crosstown rivals, the team that's tortured us for years now. I'm not sure which tells your team you believe in them more, not making your trade or bringing in a big name to try and make a cup run. In my opinion, it's bringing in someone that could put them over the top because, in my opinion, that proves that you believe they could win the cup. If you don't bring in a player, it seems like you're waving the white flag on the air. The Islanders, in my opinion, made 2 moves today. One was acquiring Shane Prince, and the second one was acquiring a first-round playoff exit.
Wow. Well, look, on the premise, I would agree that today was a pretty disappointing day for this team, all things considered. I think we all spoke about this at length over the last couple of weeks, and what it came down to is we've all said this team needs a needle-moving player, and to be frank, they didn't get that today. I think that's a perfectly fair thing to say, and to say that's anything other than disappointing, I think would be, basically just trying to spin it to make it seem better. But here's the thing. It's very difficult, I think, given the landscape of the market, to go out and get that player. Garth didn't do it. This is not meant to excuse him, but it is difficult. And how teams win championships is not in February. It is before the season, because generally the players that do get acquired at the deadline aren't the guys that come in and win cups. Sure, it's happened. Not going to argue against that. But I think that's less of the rule of thumb and more the exception. So, I think to your point, this is Garth Snow saying that he believes in this team. Time will tell if that pays dividends or not. I think it's a little early to say yes or no. I struggle with the notion that this team is going to make a deep playoff run, even if they do win a round. But this is the team that he signed up with to play in April, pretty much back in October, and short of acquiring 1 or 2 or 3 players that were moved, one of which only wanted to go play for the Rangers. That player wasn't out there. So what he did do was bring in a controllable asset, and those, as we know, are very valuable in today's NHL. But to Pete's point, no, that doesn't help us now, and I think that's what makes today very frustrating.
Well, I'm going to say that I don't think that this is a move or a lack of move that shows confidence from Garth Snow and the team. To me, this is a move or a non-move that shows that Garth Snow doesn't want to do anything to help improve this team and take the next step. I think they're content. I think they want to keep selling the fan base on a future that they think is bright. Well, we have our draft pick. Things are going to be better next year. We got this great prospect coming up. We got this great farm system, and everything is the future, 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 and people are buying it hook, line, and sinker. And after a while, I'm tired of the same excuses that, well, there wasn't a lot of big moves made today. We didn't want to trade our first round pick. We didn't want to trade this guy. We didn't want to trade that guy. But let's go mock all the teams that did. Let's go make look at the Rangers fans. They don't have any draft picks for the next couple of years. Aha, it sucks to be them. Right, as they enjoy another playoff run, another deep run. Say what you want about that organization. Say what you want about their fans, but they go for wins. That's something we cannot say. And for people to sit here today and say, well, maybe this team's good enough. Through 60 games of a season, they're hanging on for the third spot. This roster, as currently constructed, is maxed out at a team that at best is going to win one round, if even that. You can't, and based on the likelihood that they're going to play the Rangers, you can't tell me that we're going to be favorites going to that series. We will likely be the road team. And we saw last year how vital that being the road team versus a home team was in the first round of playoffs. So no, I don't think this was a roster I don't think this was a day where Garth Snow proclaimed, we're so happy with our roster, we're so content. This was another day that the organization decided to smack its fans right in the face and say, wait till next year when things will be better. And yet people still keep buying and say, man, next year will be better. And then next year will be the same song and dance over and over again. There was no one out there. We still have to keep our picks. We're going to be great in 5 years. Right, we're going to be great in 5 years when Tavares will be 30 years old. The next group of guys will be older, past their prime, but we'll have another wave of prospects and we could all hang our hats on and say, well, we got a great farm system at least. Last time I checked, farm systems don't win playoff rounds. Farm systems don't win championships. The current roster, we're not building an AHL Bridgeport team here. We're building an NHL team to win a Stanley Cup. And this team today, this organization decided that even if we're not going to win a cup this year, one playoff round is still not good enough. That's what they're saying. They're saying we're happy being the same as we were last year. We're happy making back-to-back playoffs and nothing else. And to me, it's a goddamn joke that we keep doing the same thing over and over again, and we expect the fans to be happy. We've set the bar so damn low with this organization that people are excited. Ooh, Shane Prince, look at his Corsi, look at his possession numbers. Yeah, look, he has 12 points in 42 games with the Ottawa Senators, a team that's out of the playoffs, a team that by every stretch of needed a 25-game stretch last season where they won 20 games in a row, whatever the hell it was, to get into the playoffs. Yet this is the guy that everyone's saying, well, good thing we got a controllable asset. We got another third-line player that we can plug in for depth. We got a 14th friggin' forward here who won't move, who won't do anything to help this team going forward, and it's only going to play if there's three guys hurt in front of him. So I'm sorry, today was such a failure again by the organization, a failure by Garth Snow, and another day where the damn organization keeps taking its fan base for granted and expecting us to be happy with mediocrity. And after a while, it's got to friggin' stop.
You know what? Today, yeah, in a bubble is a failure, and this is a point that both of you guys made back in September. The real failure here, looking back at it, is the off season, because to the point I made earlier, it's very difficult to find these guys in this cap era in the middle of the season that can really move the needle for your team. I think we found that out again today. There's just really none of them moved outside of Eric Stahl, who only wanted to play.
They move the first-round pick. Why do we have to have every first-round pick? What is the deal if you move one first-round pick?
But Mike, there's nothing wrong with keeping a first-round pick. The problem is that there weren't enough incremental improvements made during the summer, and that I think is proven out now. That's something that both of you said in September, and I was one of the people that contended against that and said that you guys might be off.
He did the same exact thing when we made the playoffs against the Penguins. The same exact thing, and we know how that turned out. The only difference is this team is slightly more talented, and they could survive the stagnant, because if you're stagnant in a market that's always improving, you're getting worse.
For as good as Garth Snow was from July of 2014 through October of 2014, adding a lot of key components to this organization and really putting it on the map as far as being a legitimate playoff contender, that's how bad he's been from last deadline to this deadline. His big moves have been Michael Neuwirth, Tyler Kennedy, Marek Zidlicki, Steve Bernay, and Thomas Greiss. And while we all think that Greiss has obviously been very well, I'm not knocking Thomas Greiss, That's the prize. As Pete said, they made the playoffs 3 years ago against Pittsburgh. They did nothing to follow it up. They got knocked out. They didn't even make the playoffs the next season. We did the same exact thing this year, and we had the same exact trade deadline we did last year. And what happened last year? We added nothing of significance. We got knocked out in the first round. So I will tell you, history will repeat itself. At this rate, we will get knocked out in the first round, and God help me to the New York Rangers. I almost at this point, I'd rather us fall into a wild card spot and at least get bombed by Washington again, because at least then we don't have to hear the damn Ranger fans.
But again, listen, I agree. This again goes back to the offseason. Everything is worse this year compared to last year. Okay, outside of the team being on pace for a similar amount of points, players' productions are down. Right, possession is down. The only thing that's really improved is the goaltending and the penalty kill. Those two things have won the Islanders a lot of games this year, and it's masking a lot of the issues that we're seeing in terms of decreases from last year going into this year. And look, outside of like a 2 to 4 week run that they had at the start of calendar year 2016, it's been a struggle for them. Their last 10 games, I don't care what the record is, they haven't been very good. And this is something that dates back, and frankly, actually, this is more concerning now because back in October, this was at least explainable in the sense of like, oh, hey, they're playing this conservative system to maybe gear up for the second half. Well, it's the second half, and they are playing the system that they played last year, weak side pinch, 2 forecheckers, and they're not generating possession. And not only are they not generating possession, they're playing bad possession teams. So, yeah, this is an off-season problem. Sure, this is, believe me, they may have incrementally improved their possession, but it wasn't enough, and it wasn't enough because it dates back to them not doing enough in July. And I'll tell you right now, I was wrong about this. It is very clear at this point that this team, compared to last year, is not an improved team. And look, if they're content to sit here and make the playoffs and hope that Lady Luck falls on their side, that's their prerogative. They have as good of a chance to beat any playoff team as they do to lose. Nothing is separating them from any team in the playoffs. That's the thing. They're going to rely on goaltending and luck, the same thing that they've relied on all season long, and that is the real problem at this point.
Right, and that's what made today even more frustrating, because the league, the conference is close. There is not a lot of separation between teams. We were right there with everyone else, and no one else other than the Rangers. The Capitals made some minor moves. The Bruins did a little bit of help. No one made a big jump forward other than maybe the Rangers. And yet we decided that in a year when it was pretty quiet on everyone else, we decided to stand pat. And I don't care if the prices were a little bit high. I don't care if Garth Snow was on the phone for 24 hours straight. He didn't get the job done. So I don't give him a medal or a pat on the back for being in the game and making phone calls and kicking tires. Based on results, he did not do enough, or he did nothing to actually make this team better this year.
What really makes today bad is the fact that there's a very, very good chance that this team next year will be worse than this team this year. I mean,
Absolutely.
You're possibly trading. Let's say we trade Travis Hamonic for one of Edmonton's forwards, Jordan Eberle. All right, Jordan Eberle replaces Kyle Oposo. Who replaces Travis Hamonic? Lord knows there's going to be no one on the free agent market as good as Travis Hamonic. So you're either replacing him with Ryan Pulock or a lesser defenseman you signed through free agency. Because I don't see the Islanders trading for a defenseman that's anywhere in the realm of Travis Hamonic. So yeah, there's a very good chance that this team is going to be worse next year because, believe it or not, Jordan Eberle is not that much better than Kyle Oposo. He might be slightly better, but he's not that much better.
Yeah, and this is exactly why we all said that it would be really, really good for Garth Snow to make a big push this year because, yes, this is going to be the last year where this core, as we know it, is going to be together. And to your point, Pete, it is certainly likely that, from a high-end talent standpoint, the team's not going to be as good next year. Unless Ryan Pulock is Travis Hamonic overnight, which is an extreme stretch. I don't think you can count on that. It's going to be, again, a struggle next year. So, all right, so let's think about it. What needs to happen at this point to prevent this from happening next year? Because at this point, I think we're looking at an awful lot of turnover to keep pace with where we are now.
You have to get rid of one of the contracts of Grabowski or Kuhlman or Bailey. You absolutely have to. I mean, they hamstring your cap situation and add basically replacement level player production. So that's number one for me. Number two, you're going to have to find a way to add some top end scoring because with Kyle Poso gone, you're looking at John Tavares and then relying on our motley crew of forwards that shows up any day of the week they want to add scoring to our team. So you're gonna have to add some top end. I know we all laugh at the rhetoric of a top line forward, but we're gonna need someone that could put the puck in the net, especially with the Poso gone. And you're gonna need to replace Kyle Poso because I don't. We know what happens when we rely on rookies to replace veteran defensemen. We saw Matt Donovan trying to replace Mark Streit. How'd that turn out? I mean, there's a lot that you have to do. I don't even know where to start. I'm so disappointed today.
And to be honest, after today, I don't think Garth Snow's the man who should get the chance to do it. I know we talked about it a few weeks ago about is his job in danger, and Pete, you alluded to it in your opening rant. How do you go to ownership if they lose in the first round and they say, what did you do to make this team better this year? And your answer is, I signed Steve Bernier and Marek Zidlicki, and I traded for Shane Price at the deadline a third-round draft pick. So we acquired a depth player when for how many years we kept hearing about how great a drafter he is, how stacked our farm system is. Yet we just traded away, like Pete mentioned, one of our better assets in the immediate future for a player that, to be honest, should be a dime a dozen player. Every team should have 5 of these guys in their minor league systems ready to come up at any time. So where is all this wonderful drafting we've done over the last few years? I'm not knocking everything he's done as far as the draft and helping build the organization. It's nice to see some of these younger kids play, but those depth moves, why would you trade a third-round pick for a depth guy when, in theory, you should have this in your system? At this point, I wouldn't let Garth Snow run my kids' lemonade stand, and definitely not a hockey organization. I'm so fed up today with what he didn't do, and I'm not willing to give him another chance this summer to sit on his hands and do nothing, or even to try to correct the mistakes he made this year. He should not get that opportunity, especially with new ownership coming in, especially if we get knocked out in the first round, especially if it's the friggin' New York Rangers.
That's what I'm trying to say here because every time we make the playoffs, it seems like Garth's happy and things will automatically just get better. It hasn't worked for him yet. I don't know what he doesn't understand, that if you stay stagnant in a competitive market, you are getting worse.
Absolutely. Every team, the Blackhawks did not sit on their hand. And again, you hate to compare us to a team like that who's won so much in the last decade, but clearly won a cup last year. And what they do at this deadline, they went out and added pieces. The Capitals didn't stand still. The Penguins made some moves between last summer and today. Obviously, the Rangers did. The Bruins did. Yet we were happy to say, well, we made the playoffs last year. Yeah, and I guarantee he talked himself into, well, if we were healthy in the playoffs and our defensemen, we would have won that round. And who knows what would happen in the next round. That's not how it goes. Injuries are part of the game. Having quality depth is a part of the game. And yet he did the same thing 2 times in a row. He's doing it now. I'm beyond frustrated at the fact that he just does not seem to listen or learn from his mistakes, and he comes off all the friggin' time as he's the smartest guy in the room.
Well,
and the fans buy into it, and it's a goddamn shame that so many people are so enthralled with Garth Snow.
Well, wait, there's nothing wrong. So here's my bone to pick with that, because there's nothing wrong with having a long-term view. The Garth's problem, this is the one thing that I agree with you guys has been one of his deficiencies, which is he very rarely goes for the risky next level move. And both times that he did it, the Ryan Smith trade and the Thomas Vanek trade, it didn't work out.
The Smith deal wasn't a bad deal.
It wasn't.
He had 15 points in 18 games for us. The problem was that DiPietro got concussed like a week later and knocked us out of a top 5 seed.
I know, but let's get out of the weeds because Smith left as a free agent. So
we gave up nothing. We gave three guys, 2 prospects and a draft pick that turned out to be nothing. So
in hindsight, yeah, but it was a long time before they made a trade like that. The Thomas Vanek trade turned out to be a terrible trade. We all agree with that. So, but my point is that there's still nothing wrong with having a long-term view. I have zero problem with the trade that they made today. They traded a third-round draft pick, which is like 1 in 5 chance to play 100 games in the NHL, for a guy that is very likely to play 100 games for the Islanders.
Who says that? What makes you think Shane Prince is going to be some kind of NHL player? He has 12 points this season. Matt Martin has 15.
Every
Matt
single
Martin has
every
15
single
points.
metric points to him at least being a bottom 6 NHL player, if not more. I would say
Matt
it is
Donovan,
very,
Matt
very
Donovan.
likely that he
I
plays
listen,
100
I
games.
listen to all you nerds telling me Matt Donovan was the next best thing for a whole year. Where is he now on Buffalo's AHL team?
All I'm saying is, listen, the Islanders have done a really good job taking guys that haven't had an opportunity and giving them an opportunity. Okay.
Yeah, give us your
doesn't
tired, you're
mean-
hungry, you're poor, you're downtrodden. Yeah, because we're afraid to actually go for a quality, established guy. We go
That's
for all
not
the
the point, though. The point is that this is a move that should have been done in addition to the move that we all agree they should have made. Like, there's nothing wrong with the move they made today. It's the move that they didn't make that is the problem. Don't take that out on the fact that they made a quality move for, a controllable asset, which is an extremely important thing to have in today's NHL. This guy is going to sign a multi-year deal very, very cheaply, which is going to give them the room to bring in a Jordan Eberle or a Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or someone like that in the offseason. You do need guys like this.
Yeah, Brian Strait was a young controllable asset we wound up trading for also and signed after 2 weeks of games for 3 years. Look at
I'm
that.
not absolving him of that. Listen, they made a mistake there. But all I'm saying is, you look at it from a macro level, it is very important to have controllable assets in today's NHL. That does not excuse him from not taking or making the next level move. Those are two separate things.
Shouldn't the 10-year rebuild have produced plenty of controllable assets for this organization?
It has. They had zero turnover this year because everyone was under contract. That, again, not an excuse, but that's why. So, yeah, it has produced a lot of controllable assets. You want to say it hasn't produced playoff rounds? Sure, I agree with that. That's completely factual. All I'm saying is, from a macro level, high level, controllable assets, the Islanders have had a plethora of them come through. They've traded a plethora of them. What they're missing is that next level player. That is what Garth Snow.
All right, Carey. So just go back to what you said. About, and I agree. They had a number or almost a roster full of no turnover. A lot of guys had a multi-year contracts coming to the season, and again, maybe his thinking was that all these guys would progress naturally. We'll fill in a couple, Bernier and Zidlicki types at the end of the off season, and we'll go to war with that. Okay, let's say that was his approach. That was his thinking because he had all these controllable guys. Now, he's built a roster right now that very looks like I think many people would probably say at best right now is a first round knockout. Maybe they get lucky in the first round if they play the Rangers and maybe they get a great goaltending performance. Maybe they kind of reach back and dig a little bit deeper and get a little bit more out of them that they have so far. But from everything you kind of alluded to what we see now, Garth Snow has essentially built a roster which is maxed out as a first-round knockout team. Now, as we've said, now we're going to most likely this summer lose Travis Hamonic, Kyle Oposo. There'll be tough decisions on Franz Nielsen, Matt Martin, Casey Zizekas is a restricted free agent. So, more money for those guys to stay. You're going to lose some other your quality, your better players, two of your more important cogs. As we mentioned, you got to replace them somehow. So whether you're trading guys, you're signing, so he's built right now, today, after 9 seasons at the helm, a first-round max team. Now, why? I just want one reason or two, a really legitimate reason why he deserves another crack at putting together a roster next season, which Pete mentioned will most likely be worse. Why does he deserve another shot this summer to spend someone's money, to make another draft pick, to make trades? Give me a reason why.
I want to add to that and say, 5 years ago when you looked at this team and you said, when we're winning cups or when the rebuild's complete, you're going to look at players like Travis Hamonic and Kyle Oposo as key contributors to that. And believe it or not, they're not going to be that because they're both not going to be here next year most likely. So now, 5 years from now, when I look at this team, I'm going to think, Matt Barzal, Michael Del Cole, and Ryan Pulock are going to be the key contributors. Why should I believe in that now after what I just witnessed with this core?
listen, those are very, very fair complaints. I am not trying to defend Garth Snow in the way of playoff results. That I can't do that. He hasn't won any, right? All I'm saying is the process in which the Islanders are constructed at a foundational level is sound. What I think is missing is the same thing what you guys think are missing, which is the transaction to bring in the next level player. Moves like what Dallas did with Tyler Seguin and Jason Spezza, right? They have not made a move like that. Move like Washington Capitals made this year, bringing in TJ Oshie and signing Matt Niskanen last year, right? We have not made those moves. That, in a nutshell, is what the Islanders are missing. Can Garth Snow be that guy? At this point, I don't know. What I do know is that from a foundational level, the Islanders are set up to be, at the very least, a playoff team now and in the future. I'm not saying that's enough. All I'm saying is, foundationally, there is nothing wrong, nothing scary about this team being, as bad as they were in previous seasons. Okay, that is the reason to keep him, which is he's brought them down a certain path. Can he finish the job? Okay, the reason to let him go is that there's nothing to date that he's done that has proven that he can be that guy, considering this team has had 0 playoff round success, etc. I see both sides of the coin here. Me personally, I'm a process guy, and I think the Islanders have a sound process missing one key aspect. I'm willing to give Garth Snow another chance to prove that he can be that guy. I totally understand the opposite opinion of anyone who does not want to give him that chance. Believe me, I get it.
You could argue that his Oshie move or his Spezza move were Grabowski and Kuhlman, and what did we get out of that? 2 overpaid third liners. So that could also put into question Garth Snow's talent evaluation skills, because those two, less than 2 years after they were signed, are huge anchors on this team right now.
I think it's a little different because at the time those players were signed, this team had a very, very poor track record for many reasons of not being able to get NHL free agents. I think the Nick Leddy and Johnny Boychuk trades are a much more accurate assessment of moves like that. But yes, at this point, this is another situation where Snow needs to adapt to the situation and potentially make some moves that are a little bit less straight line than player X is on an expiring contract. It's time to let him walk or it's time to re-sign him. I agree. That is one aspect. Garth is generally very creative in the ways of accumulating undervalued assets. For example, the trade that he made today. Where he has not been creative is shuffling assets on the roster, making trades, real hockey trades, which I know are difficult in today's NHL, but making trades to shake up the room, stuff like that. Letting go of players that have proven that they, aren't helping the team so much. I agree that this has been one of his deficiencies, but macro level, foundationally, I'm pretty satisfied with where the team is right now, and that to me is the reason why he, could be allowed to continue down this path.
He continues. To me, he comes off, and maybe I'm just completely misreading him. But just based on the interviews you hear and you see around draft time and free agency, he really thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, and he's always trying to do something outside the box. And maybe it's a function of for years, with Charles Wang as owner, he had to get creative when it came to kind of finding cap hits and hitting the floor with not a lot of money. So maybe that's like how he's been trained to think. And he always thinks he's one step ahead. But moves like today, moves like over the summer, or non-moves like over the summer or today, it really drives home a point to me that he really believes it's his way or the highway, and he's not. I don't think he's flexible. I don't think he's willing to adapt. I think he almost wants to win with certain guys just to say, I did it this way. And again, not to pick on him, but to me, a guy like Josh Bailey is a perfect example. He had a good 6-week stretch in his 5th season, 5-year contract extension, where I would guarantee that Michael Grabner had a big rookie season, 30-plus goals. Everyone was obviously very excited. Garth made a very shrewd waiver wire pickup, 5-year contract. It's like he wants to try to prove to everyone his worth, And I don't know, maybe it's because maybe he heard the criticisms of a lot of the fans even or media saying, "Oh, there's the goaltender, he's the GM now," and maybe he just wants to win his way to say to everyone, "Screw you." But whatever he's doing, and I agree with you, Carey, if the organization's better off today than it was, say, 5 years ago, or 8 years ago, or 9 years ago when he took over, it's not good enough. And I don't think he's the right guy to get us to the next level for a lot of the reasons why you listed.
That's what scares me the most because, as I mentioned in my rant, the Islanders had an incredible start to last season, and Garth has had 3 opportunities to improve this team since then, and he's gone 0 for 3. Strike 3, sit down, you're out.
What if they beat the Rangers or whoever they play in the first round? Does that change the opinion, or are we like are we so set that, or not me, but you guys so set where the fact that he isn't bringing in those players, what if they do beat the Rangers? Then what? Like, are we saying like Garth was right, or are we saying they? Because I think they should have brought in this player whether they beat the Rangers or not, like or whoever they play. To me, bringing in a player like this would have done a lot more benefit to them, and trying to give the room an extra push. To me, that would have been the right process. But I don't want to necessarily automatically assume that they can't win in the first round, because I think they can. Where I think we all agree is that they are not a frontline Stanley Cup contender. And if you do look at it from that way, if Snow is able to recognize that, then I actually think there is a bit of good in him showing restraint that way, and not moving assets that he knows aren't going to potentially be needle movers that way.
If they win a playoff round, then I am absolutely on board with Garth Snow's process, his plan, willing to obviously give him additional time to finish what he started. But right now, his process has not produced enough results. Now, obviously, that could change come springtime. If they win in the first round and they get to the second round, and if they advance there, or if they have a good showing in the second round against the Capitals, whoever they may wind up facing, I will absolutely say, you know what? On February 29th, when I called for Garth's head, I was completely wrong. He, you know what, his patience paid off, and I'm fine with that. I have no problem eating crow here if that's what it comes down to. But as of today, nothing he's done in his tenure here has proven to produce results for clearly not championship level, but not even obviously a playoff round level yet. Now, obviously, last year it's a little bit of a coin flip in the first round, but we didn't get, you don't get pats on the back for getting to Game 7 on the road and losing. That's just not how it works. At least it shouldn't work like that. You shouldn't get commended for a first round knockout when more than half the teams in the league make the playoffs. So, right, if they win a round this year, I'm all on board of giving him more time, giving him a couple more cracks at free agency and drafting and trading to get this team to the championship level, the final level. But if he doesn't at least get past round 1 this year, there's nothing I can say or nothing anyone's going to tell me that's going to make me believe that he's the right guy to get us to that final level eventually.
Yeah, so this is one of those things where I actually think that, because essentially what this comes down to is a judgment based off of what potentially is at most a 7-game series. And I think generally I think that's something that should be more reserved for coaching. So I think it's a foregone conclusion that Capuano isn't going to be here regardless of Snow's status if they don't win in the first round this year. Staple alluded to that, and frankly it's just common sense. I struggle a little bit more at the GM level because I'm generally a process guy at that level, and I'm more of a results guy at the coaching level. That's just the way that I believe it to be. So that's the struggle for me. Is I just really like the process, the general process and foundation of where this team is going, and there are a lot of bad GMs in the NHL today, and I get a little bit nervous that, and again, this is the devil you know versus the devil you don't know, but I get a little bit nervous given where this team is right now that if they don't win in the first round and you fire Garth Snow, someone could come in here and kind of blow it up in a way that might be not something that we may all want. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. All I'm saying is I don't know if that's a good thing, and that's why I generally reserve the pure results aspect of it to the coaching side of things.
Well, again, I understand where you're coming from, but as you said, if this team goes out again this season and proves it can't get past the first round, I don't think it's a bad thing to really shake it up if that's what it comes down to. If it comes to a new GM comes in and moves pieces around, I mean, part of being the GM is not just obviously acquiring the guys, but as Pete alluded to as well, you need to get rid of these guys at a certain time. Everyone says all about asset management. Well, part of asset management is maximizing a guy's return when he's at his peak. So maybe some of it is you look at the roster and say, man, we really like, and I'm not advocating, just using it as an example, we really like Anders Lee. Young player, big body, 25 goal scorer last year. We think he could be a consistent 20, 25 goal scorer. But is this the best you're going to get from Anders Lee? And is that good enough? And I'm just using him as an example. So you look at him and say, do I want to get rid of Anders Lee? Can I maximize his value now and get two pieces that might help me win now? Or two pieces that I can use to turn into something to help me win now. So I think that's part of what sometimes you need a fresh set of eyes to look at these things. The GM often will fall in love with his own players. And I understand why you fall in love with your own players. Obviously, you have some type of belief in them to acquire them in the first place. But there's also a bias there. And sometimes you need another person to come in and say, yeah, he might have all these positives, but there's a lot of negatives here that outweigh the positives.
I mean, that's what I was getting at earlier. There's so many Jekyll and Hyde forwards on this team that show up one day and then the next day they're gone. You could list any of our forwards outside of, I guess, John Tavares and Franz Nielsen. Even Franz. Franz is always there defensively and in that role. But every other single forward, except for the fourth line and JT, you don't know if they're showing up that game. And, that's a problem, in my opinion, because we don't have that top-end talent, and our depth is so inconsistent that you have nights like the night in Calgary and the last night where, the whole team just didn't show up, and it showed on the scoreboard and how we played.
That's a league-wide problem, and frankly, I think the point that you made that the Islanders don't have enough top-end talent, which is the point that I think we all have made at various points during this podcast, I think that's what it comes back down to, which is, they obviously do have a superstar, and they have a collection of top-pairing defensemen in Leddy and Hamonic. But outside of that, from a pure scoring perspective, no, they don't really have that player. So when you compare, and it's tough because you play in the same division as Washington, you play in the same division as Pittsburgh, and so those teams are teams that are going to be directly comparable to you pretty much always. And no, we don't have the top-end talent at that level. So I totally get where you're coming from that perspective, but I think, from a consistency standpoint, I don't really think that's something that at the middle levels it can really be corrected. I think this is every player, every team in the league has this issue. It is the top end talent where you can close that gap, which is what Washington has done and which is what Pittsburgh has done in the past, and obviously to date that's not where the Islanders are.
I don't know. I feel like our team's worse with that. Think of it. Anders Lee has 4 goals in 2016. Brock Nelson was sniping every night a few weeks ago, and I feel like he's been invisible ever since then. Kyle Oposo shows up whenever he wants. Just go through. Ryan Strom's had his head up his ass all year. Just go through the lineup, and you'll see that. We have. I feel like it's not this bad across the whole league, but I could be blind to it.
The stat that I saw is that the Islanders are the only team in the league with 9 players that have 23 points or more, which I know is a super arbitrary number, but I think in this case it does show that a lot of the league does battle with a level of inconsistency. It's just goaltending obviously is paramount in this league, and goal scorers are streaky, and I think generally this is kind of what the NHL wants, which is a whole lot of parity, and with parity comes a whole lot of streaks up and down. So that's why I don't necessarily, I can't really get on him too much for that because I think at this point it should be expected, just generally where the league is going.
Can we get on?
Um,
Can we get on Garth for having a crap load of top five picks and having very little besides Tavares to show for it right now? Is that fair to get on him for? Because that's where it seems like a lot of these teams get their, that's where Pittsburgh got their high end guys. That's where obviously Washington got Ovechkin. So is it fair to get on Garth for the misses or at least the not top level, not acquiring those top level guys when you have a top five pick? I mean, at some point, I hear people saying, I read on the message boards, well, we had the fifth pick in a four-person draft. Oh, shucks. So we had the third pick in a two-person draft. Oh, shucks. That's just our bad luck. Well, if Garth's as good as some people claim he is, shouldn't he find better? Shouldn't he be, is he a victim of his own success then? Shouldn't he be finding better players then at the fifth spot, the ninth spot, wherever exactly he is?
I
So
think it's fair. I think it's fair to say they've made some mistakes with some of their top five picks. Yeah, I mean, I listen. It's tough to argue that at this point. Obviously Nino Niederreiter is a pick that didn't work out. Trading down, and again, the '08 draft wasn't great, but trading down to get Josh Bailey, looking back on it, Erik Karlsson sitting right there. It's tough to blame him because Karlsson wasn't ranked that high, but at the same time, like, yeah, you had a top five pick. I get that. I totally get that. They've done a lot better in other areas of the draft. A lot of this team has come from late in the first round and into the second, third, and fourth round. So, I think it's two sides to the story. I think generally his drafting has been above average to very good, but when they have had the top five picks outside of John Tavares, no, they haven't. They don't have a superstar there, and the Ryan Strome story isn't complete, but he's obviously in the middle of a sophomore slump that's been extremely frustrating. I'm sure not just for us, but for him. And that book isn't written yet. We don't know what he's going to be. So if you want to get on him for not getting the superstars in the top area of the draft, I mean, it's not totally unfair.
I mean, I'm just so disappointed today. I mean, for some reason, I don't know why, but this weekend, all weekend, I was thinking Garth would come through and do something for us. And when I saw Arthur Staple tweet Shane Prince, and then to top it off, he tweeted Marc Andre Cliche, and then Islanders are done. I thought it was like I was not in the real world. I don't know.
yeah,
I
no,
think
I honestly, I was very disappointed because same as you, Pete. I really thought that this year, with all the factors we described and we spoke about, previously, new area, they haven't obviously, won in a long time. The possibility, the very real possibility, you're going to be facing your crosstown rivals in the first round. I thought this would be the year he'd get a little aggressive and make a splash. And not to say he would trade away, three prospects and a top pick for one or two rentals, but I thought he'd be a little more aggressive in acquiring an impact player. And I don't care if he tried behind the scenes. I don't want people to say, well, he probably tried really. I'm sure he tried hard. I'm sure 29 other GMs tried hard too. But you don't get pats on the back and win awards at playoff rounds for trying really hard and failing. That's not how it works. You don't get participation trophies here. So very disappointed today. And it's funny as the clock got closer to 3 and it was relatively quiet. I said, "Oh man!" I said, "He's really." To myself, all I said to him is like, "He can't come out of this trade deadline with nothing. He has to come out with something." And I don't know, maybe Shane Prince is his something. And again, when everyone zigs, he zags. And I don't know, maybe that, and he wants to stay that way. He wants to prove that he knows what he's doing and he's smarter than everyone else. But it's very frustrating to say the least.
I think
Yeah.
a fair point to add to that is I was watching the TSN coverage today, and one of the first things they said after the fact was they were talking about teams that really surprised you with what they did at the deadline. And Gene McClellan said the Islanders were his biggest surprise. I mean, if a team, he basically said that this team needs another move to take a step forward, and they didn't provide that. He basically questioned what the end goal here was. I mean, if if experts around the league are saying it, I mean, can't see why Garth Snow's, and fans are obviously saying that as well. I can't see why Garth Snow isn't thinking the same way.
No, I get it. I do want to take a minute to get into the weeds a little bit with Shane Prince. I think that is something that is a fair thing to do because we've talked a lot about high level macro stuff, and I do think that if you take a look at this trade in a bubble, and let's just get out of that macro state for a second, I do think there is a fair bit amount about this trade. Um, for lack of a better word, Ottawa is just not very good of an organization these days, and I really do think that there's a good chance that they may have undervalued this player by a fair bit. It's not even just the possession stats, which you guys know, everyone knows at this point is very good because it literally hit Twitter and everyone's making fun of it. But he does have really good scoring rate so far, playing on a line with Zach Smith and Chris Neal, and that actually makes me a little bit hopeful that if he gets put into a situation playing with better players, that there is a chance that he'll be able to continue that. He has a fairly decent pedigree of scoring in juniors. He scored 65 points in the AHL last year as a 22-year-old and was named to the second All-Star team, which theoretically, I guess, makes him one of the 6 best forwards in the AHL last year. So I don't want to make it seem like this is a player that, is Tyler Kennedy. I think this, I agree he's not going to necessarily be a huge help this year, but, we do talk about controllable assets. He is a restricted free agent. I think it's pretty likely that the Islanders will give him a multi-year deal that is pretty cheap. And if he does turn out to be able to continue those scoring rates, they may have actually found a pretty good controllable player here that will help bridge the gap and will allow them to bring in some higher salaried players. So I don't necessarily think today is all bad. I have zero problem paying the price of a third-round pick because the minute Shane Prince steps on the ice in an Islander jersey, he's inherently more likely to play for the Islanders than the third-round pick is. So, from that standpoint, I don't have a problem with that trade at all in a bubble. In fact, I quite like it. It's obviously the macro stuff that we discussed that I have more of an issue with. But I did just want to bring that point up because I do think that it's throughout all this noise, which is important. I do think it's fair to say that the Islanders may have actually stumbled on a pretty good player here.
I consider myself a fairly knowledgeable hockey fan. I really do, and not just with the Islanders, with most teams around the league. I had zero idea who Shane Prince was up until 10 minutes before we acquired him. And I'm not even exaggerating. I had no idea who he was. I saw the name come out, and the first thing I said is, let me go look this guy up, And I looked and I said, 12 points in 42 games. I saw the same things you did, Carey. He's had some success at the AHL level, 22, 23-year-old kid. Okay. Listen, he might turn out to be a wonderful pickup, be under the radar, and then 3 years from now we'll all have a great laugh that, can you believe the time we made fun of Garth Snow for acquiring Shane Prince? And I look at him, he's a key cog in a team that's an elite level team with us. It could happen, but it's going to be really tough for people and fans to separate. And I don't blame them to separate Shane Prince from the overall failure of today. Shane Prince might turn out to be a wonderful guy, a wonderful asset. Let's just say he's controllable. You paid a third-round pick for a guy who's already somewhat developed, and maybe you kind of gain that as opposed to drafting your own third-round pick and then developing yourself. But, man, I know what you're saying, Carey, and I don't disagree with anything you say, but, man, that's a tough sell to make to a lot of fans today. That, as Pete and I just demonstrated, we had a lot of high hopes for today. And
I'm not trying to sell the day as a success. That's not my intention. What I am trying to say is that there might be somewhat of a silver lining, so to speak, throughout today's noise, where this team may have actually gotten a player that could really help them, down the line. I think, and again, this goes back to the short-term versus long-term view. It's important to have both running at the same time. And what I would have liked is for them to have complemented this long-term view with a player that basically could be what we hope Shane Prince develops into, which to a player that the player that Pete brought up before would have been like a Chris Versteeg, right? I mean, I think we all agree. They're actually pretty similar stylistically from what I can understand. A little bit feisty, fast, not very big, goal-scoring ability. So I do think there is some possibility that Chris Versteeg is a player type where this guy might develop into, and it would have been nice to have Chris Versteeg now and Chris Versteeg later on the same team, and I think that would have been a really good complement to each other and bridge that gap and really help the team both now and tomorrow. So that if we are going to get into the short-term versus long-term conversation again, that is kind of something where I think it would have made sense if they were going to go in this direction. But really the point I just wanted to make is that, as bad as from a high level today may have seemed, if you do go into the weeds a little bit, it is possible that this team did acquire a pretty good player for them.
I mean, I went on HF boards, which is a fair thing to do because obviously fans of all 30 teams are on there. And I went to the Senators thread and I read some stuff, and it was basically, I mean, I won't admit to knowing much about Senators prospects, but like I said in my rant, a fan wrote they had to move him because he was competing for a spot with the likes of Lazar, Pemple, Paul, Zingle, and White. I mean, the only two I've heard of on there are Lazar and Pumple. And I mean, it's nice to think that you could pick up another team's scraps, especially if it feels like they're being misused. But I mean, think of it from another team's standpoint in last year. You saw Matt Donovan. You think of the Islanders' defense. You're like, wow, it's probably hard to get in there. They got Hamonic and Dahan and Letty and Boychuk and Wisnowski and Hickey and Reinhart and Pulak as prospects. This Donovan kid has nice possession numbers. He's actually even produced some offense in the NHL. Wow, let's try and get him. And then, I mean, there's a reason these players aren't in the everyday lineup, no matter what their possession metrics say, and no matter what they look like in small sample sizes. There is a reason that. I mean, the Senators fan basically said it's a good move because we would have waived him next season. So I mean, let's put that into perspective. It's not all about the numbers here. This to me sounds like a tweener, a minor league NHL tweener.
Yeah, but Ottawa's just not an organization that is doing a very good job right now. I mean, that's the one thing. I'm not guaranteeing that this is going to be a good player. It is certainly possible that his goal scoring and his point scoring ends up not translating, and he does turn into a quadruple A player. It's possible, but at the same time, at least through the 45 games that he's played, that's not the indication. Again, very small sample size to start his career. He is pretty young. But I don't know. Ottawa came out and basically said the reason they made this trade was so that Shane Prince can develop. I don't know.
That's ridiculous because if you're that if you're that high on the kid, if Ottawa really was enamored with him and
you want him to develop for your team,
right? Well, exactly. So I don't understand why they're trading him then. If that's
not very good.
Well, yes. And as Pete said, and again, I don't profess, obviously, as I said, I don't know anything about Shane Prince other than the last several hours of just looking up his stats and reading what people's comments are. But if there is some truth into, hey, they were going to waive him next year anyway, so we got something out of him. I mean, that's from Ottawa's standpoint, that's a good deal. And again, maybe he turns out to be an effective player for the Islanders. I'm not discounting that and saying it can never happen, but it's. Like I said, Carey, and I understand, you're trying to not say defend him, but you're trying to see that okay, he's a good move, but the day itself sucked because they should have did more. And I get what you're saying, but it is tough for people to separate the two. It's going to be tough for people to say, well, we like the Shane Prince move, but we should have done X, Y, and Z in addition to that. People are going to see it as we only got friggin' Shane Prince on a trade deadline, probably the biggest trade deadline they've had in the last decade on the team, as far as the organization goes. So I have a hard time buying the comment from the GM from Ottawa saying, well, we want to see him develop somewhere else because he didn't have a chance here. That to me, that's him just trying to save face and say something nice about the guy. I don't know, maybe he is. Maybe he's the nicest GM around, and he really wanted to see a competitor do well for themselves.
Look, I understand when you look at it from a high level, it's a tough sell. I'm not trying to argue against that. But I will say this. If you want to take a look at this deal from a high level without going into the statistics and everything, Shane Prince is a 23-year-old player that's going to be on the Islanders NHL roster at least tomorrow and likely at least through next year, if not longer. Any player that they would have picked in the third round in 2016, the earliest that they make it to the Islanders roster is likely 2019 or 2020. So you're at least accelerating that a little bit, and hopefully it works out from that perspective. And frankly, so I understand why they made this particular trade from that perspective. That's why all I ask for on individual moves is logic, and I think there's a lot of logic to a move like this. It's not excusing the overall day because I agree we're all disappointed and frustrated. But I did want to dip into the weeds a little bit and just make that claim that there is logic to this type of move because I think if we are going to be fair and look at all sides of what today entails, I think this was something that was important to point out.
So did we acquire the Brian Strait of forwards? A guy that a team wants to get rid of because he didn't have room to crack their roster, maybe AHL tweener type, NHL tweener type. And we're gonna force him into the lineup on a nightly basis because we want to prove everyone else is wrong and we're right.
If you want to make a comparison to past acquisitions, I would say this is more of a Thomas Hickey or Michael Grabner type than a Brian Strait type. So,
Corey Conacher.
No, they're not even comparable players. This is a player that, from what I understand, prides his game on speed, hockey sense, right, and basically finding the gap and being able to score. That is essentially what the Michael Grabner acquisition was about back in 2010. And what the Thomas Hickey acquisition was about in defense comparable in 2013. That, to me, is a way more accurate depiction of what this player is about than what Brian Strait is about, even dating back to 2013 when he wasn't as bad as he is now.
Yeah, I would have used that third rounder on Teddy Purcell or Chris Versteeg, but that's me. I'm not happy with Garth. I don't think that there's really any need to waste an asset, especially right now, on Shane Prince. If you wanted Shane Prince so bad, you could have acquired him in the offseason, especially since Senator fans think he was a few months from being waived. But whatever. Garth saw it as something he needed to do. And unfortunately for us and Garth had extremely different visions on what today should have entailed. So, any final thoughts from you guys on the deadline, on last night's Albatross in Edmonton, on tomorrow's game against the Canucks? Anything?
Well, I guess I'll start because we'll probably sandwich in a bad, a negative myself, positive from Carey, and then Pete, you can finish with a negative. The game last night was a complete disaster. They got outworked for the first 40 minutes. They finally started skating in the third period, and Halak had a very bad third period. So hopefully it's a one-game thing. Hopefully after the last couple games, in Calgary and then last night in Edmonton, they'll realize that they need to come and start skating from the puck drop. And so hopefully, if they come out tomorrow in Vancouver and they have a good performance, I'll kind of chalk up last night to an aberration. They were playing their overall record the last couple weeks has been pretty good. So hopefully that's all one blip on the radar screen. But as far as the deadline, I said my piece for the most part. It's just incredibly frustrating that in a day where not many other teams really took a swing for it, you maybe had a chance to kind of nudge yourself ahead of the pack at least, or at the very least maybe stay with some teams, and they just didn't do it. And yeah, I understand Shane Prince. Again, maybe Garth has a really bona fide interest in him, and again, he might turn out to be a very productive player when it's all said and done. But when you see other teams, you see the Rangers make their move yesterday for Eric Staal. Who's maybe not the same player he was a few years ago, but he's still an effective player. It's really frustrating to sit here tonight and say we let a good opportunity slip by. And I understand there wasn't a ton of guys that were traded, but to me that's still not an excuse to not improve. To me it's not no one else improved, so that's okay. We didn't improve. That's not good enough. It's not good enough. I think the organization has set the bar too low, and I think that starts from upstairs down. And I think I'm really curious if you can kind of get some of these guys, some of the players, with the cameras off, and what would they really think about today? Because I'm sure the players were excited. Arthur Staples said last week that Tavares made a comment that we're not expecting to lose players. We want to add players, and not to disparage Shane Prince, but I'm sure they meant somebody a little bit more immediately impactful than a guy like Shane Prince. So I'm curious what effect they'll have on the room. It could be one mode of, hey, the organization has confidence in us, so let's go out and do it. Or the other side is the organization doesn't have confidence in us because they didn't bring us any reinforcements, and now we're stuck kind of with the same group, and we really could have used a charge to move forward and get over the hump. So I'm just incredibly frustrated this evening. If they win tomorrow in Vancouver, it'll make me feel happy for a little bit. But I just think we missed a really big opportunity this trade deadline to really fortify ourselves against most likely a first-round opponent. Although Pittsburgh's only a point behind us now, so who knows? But it's just incredibly frustrating that another trade deadline comes and goes, and we kind of stand pat, and we think that, and it's almost like we're accepting mediocrity, and maybe some people they're okay with back-to-back player for years, even if we get bounced in the first round. But to me, that's not good enough. It should never be good enough, and it's time the organization and the fans demand more from the team, from ownership, from management.
My thought's pretty simple. If you believed in this team going into today, you should continue to believe in this team. If you had concerns about this team going into today, you should have the same concerns leaving today. I think that would have basically been true for no matter who they acquired outside of a handful of players, most of which, frankly, didn't even move. So that's kind of where I stand. If you are a believer in this team, then nothing that happened today should dissuade you from that. And if you were not a believer in this team, nothing that happened today should dissuade you from that either. There does seem to be a fair amount of, I think, disagreement throughout the fan base on what this team is. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think that basically comes with the team being a slightly above average to good team at this point in the season. So, that's pretty much where I stand. There wasn't a whole lot that really changed my opinion on what the Islanders are. I'm generally fairly positive about their chances, although the last 10-plus games have concerned me a little bit, despite their record. And, at this point, it's on the players that are in the room that have been here to go take it for themselves. And, they're playing the right system. I think they have the right guys in place to at least win a round. Time will tell to see if they can do it or not. But that's my opinion about the Islanders today is essentially the same as it was when I woke up this morning, which is good team, middle of the road contender, chance to win a round, probably not going to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, well, you guys know my thoughts. Not happy. Still love my team. But Garth did nothing to reward that love, that's for sure. Personally, I'm most excited to know which of the three misfit forwards gets in tomorrow, whether it's Bernier, Prince, or Bolton. That's a question that's on my mind right now. Can't wait for that tweet. Think we'll see Grice in net. Yarrow did not have a good third period yesterday, and Grice hasn't played in a while. And if Cappy was hesitant to give Grice the reins when he was dominating the competition, then I'm sure he won't be forcing Yarrow in there, especially since he's played a lot of hockey the last week or so. And he's played well, but, it's his first slip-up. I think he got 2 goals in the 3 games before yesterday. And he had a shutout through 2 periods, so definitely playing well. But I think we'll see Grice tomorrow just to keep him fresh and just to keep that competition going. So, yeah, I look forward to us playing another bad team. Hopefully we show up for this one and not wait until the third period. But, that'll do it for us. Thank you for listening. Let's go Islanders. Make sure to review us on iTunes and rate us. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.